You're always the one who texts first. You check in, ask how they're doing, remember the little things, and make the effort to stay connected. You tell yourself it's just who you are: thoughtful, reliable, someone people can count on. But lately, something feels different. You've started to notice how quiet it gets when you don't reach out. No messages, no follow-ups, no one asking if you're okay. And that silence says more than words ever could. It makes you wonder, if you stopped trying altogether, would anyone even notice? It's not just about texting first. It's about feeling like you're carrying the weight of every relationship by yourself. You're the one who keeps conversations alive, who makes plans, who shows up emotionally when others don't. And over time, that imbalance starts to wear you down. You begin to question your worth, not because you don't have value, but because no one seems to reflect it back to you. It's exhausting to keep pouring into people who rarely pour back. And eventually, it stops feeling like connection and starts feeling like loneliness in disguise. Then one day, something shifts. You don't make an announcement. You don't explain it to anyone. You just stop. Not because you stopped caring, but because caring started to hurt more than silence ever could. It wasn't a dramatic decision, it was quiet, almost invisible, but it meant everything. You realized that constantly reaching out and getting nothing in return wasn't love, it was self-neglect. And for the first time, you chose to step back, not out of anger, but out of self-protection. What you experienced isn't random, and it's not weakness. Psychology actually offers deep insight into why some people slowly withdraw instead of speaking up. There are patterns, emotional responses, and even brain-based mechanisms behind this behavior. And once you understand them, something changes. You stop blaming yourself. You start seeing the bigger picture. Here are 5 psychological reasons why some people quietly stop reaching out and why it might make more sense than you think. Some people are naturally wired to care deeply for others. They're the ones who listen, support, and show up even when no one asks them to. Psychologists call this the tend and befriend response, a pattern where instead of fighting or fleeing under stress, a person leans into connection and caregiving. But here's the part people rarely talk about. This system only works when there's reciprocity. When you're always the one giving, always the one checking in, always the emotional anchor for everyone else, something inside you starts to drain. It's not because you're weak, it's because you've been running on empty for too long. Eventually, your mind and body recognize that imbalance, and they begin to pull back, not to punish others, but to protect you. The tend and befriend response is a psychological pattern identified by researchers to explain how some people react to stress. Instead of fighting or withdrawing, they move toward others, nurturing, supporting, and maintaining relationships as a way to cope. It's a beautiful instinct, rooted in empathy and connection. But it comes with an unspoken expectation: mutual care. When that care isn't returned, the system begins to fail. What once felt natural starts to feel draining. Over time, the same instinct that pushed you to connect becomes the very reason you feel exhausted and emotionally depleted. Emotional burnout doesn't happen all at once. It builds quietly. It's the result of constantly showing up for others while ignoring your own needs. At first, you don't even notice it. You keep giving, keep listening, keep being the strong one. But inside, something is wearing down. Conversations feel heavier, effort feels forced, and eventually, even the people you care about start to feel like obligations instead of connections. That's when your mind steps in, not to shut you off completely, but to create distance, because staying the same would only hurt more. Most people think being ignored is just an emotional inconvenience, something you should get over, but your brain doesn't see it that way. When you reach out and get nothing back, it doesn't just feel disappointing, it feels painful. There's a deep, almost physical discomfort in realizing you're not a priority to someone you care about. And when that experience repeats over time, your system adapts. It starts to associate reaching out with rejection, with disappointment, with hurt. So eventually, it chooses the safer option: silence. Not because you don't want connection, but because you're trying to avoid pain. Neuroscience has shown that social rejection activates the same regions of the brain as physical pain, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex. In simple terms, your brain processes emotional exclusion as if it were an actual injury. That's why being ignored can feel so intense and hard to shake off. It's not all in your head, in the way people dismiss it, it's literally in your brain. So when you stop reaching out, you're not overreacting. You're responding to a real, measurable form of pain your body is trying to protect you from. For some people, pulling away isn't a sudden decision, it's a pattern shaped over time. Psychologists call this an avoidant attachment style. It develops when connection, at some point in life, stopped feeling safe. Maybe you reached out and were ignored. Maybe you opened up and were dismissed. Over time, your brain learned a quiet rule. Needing people leads to disappointment. So instead of risking that pain again, you adapt. You become more independent, more self-contained, less likely to initiate. From the outside, it can look like you don't care. But in reality, you care deeply. You've just learned that showing it comes with a cost. So, you protect yourself the only way you know how, by staying one step back. These patterns rarely start in adulthood. They begin much earlier. The way you were responded to as a child quietly shaped how you relate to others today. If your needs were overlooked, if your emotions weren't acknowledged, or if you learned that asking for support didn't lead to comfort, those experiences didn't just disappear. They became your blueprint. You may not consciously remember those moments, but your nervous system does, and it carries that memory into every relationship. So when you hesitate to reach out now, it's not random, it's a reflection of lessons learned long before you had the words to understand them. Sometimes the issue isn't that you don't want to reach out, it's that you don't know how to explain what you're feeling. You might feel overwhelmed, hurt, or disconnected, but when someone asks what's wrong, the words just don't come. It's like there's a gap between what you feel and what you can say. So instead of trying and failing to explain, you choose silence. Not because you're hiding something, but because expressing it feels impossible. Over time, that silence becomes your default. You stop reaching out, not because you don't need support, but because you don't know how to ask for it in a way that feels clear or safe. There's actually a psychological term for this experience: alexithymia, which literally means no words for emotions. It doesn't mean you lack feelings. In fact, people with alexithymia often feel deeply. The challenge is in identifying and expressing those emotions. Without that internal clarity, communication becomes difficult. And when you can't name what you're going through, asking for help feels even harder. So instead of reaching out, you withdraw, not as a rejection of others, but as a response to something internal that was never fully developed or supported. What if stopping wasn't a sign of loss, but a sign of growth? Psychology suggests that humans need 3 core things to thrive: autonomy, competence, and connection. When you stop reaching out, people often assume you've given up on connection. But that's not always true. Sometimes, you're simply reclaiming your autonomy. You're no longer giving your energy to every relationship out of habit or obligation. You're becoming more intentional. You're learning that not everyone deserves the same access to you. And that shift can feel uncomfortable at first, even lonely. But it's also powerful, because for the first time, your effort is no longer automatic, it's chosen. And that choice is what turns connection into something real, instead of something one-sided. When you step back and look at the full picture, something important becomes clear. You didn't stop reaching out because you're cold, distant, or difficult. You stopped because your mind and body were trying to protect you. Every unanswered message, every one-sided effort, every moment you showed up and no one showed up for you, it all added up. And at some point, something inside you said, enough. That's not weakness, that's awareness. But here's the question that matters now. Is your silence something you chose, or something you're stuck in? Because there's a difference between protecting your peace and losing your voice. One is strength. The other is something that deserves attention and care. And once you understand that difference, you can start making new choices, not from pain, but from clarity. So if this resonates with you, if it puts words to something you've been feeling but couldn't explain, stay with this conversation. There's more to your patterns than you think, and understanding them might be the first step toward building connections that finally feel mutual, safe, and real.